Thanks for having me, Mbali. And you and I have known each other for a few years before I even came into this organization. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think this is why this is very exciting, because the COVID-19 has not only impacted, I think, the whole world, but businesses more than anything. And I think this
Mm,
brought me back to one of the conversations that we used to have as to how do you position yourself for I think,
mm,
future innovation. So that is why this conversation is very exciting for me.
yeah. Well, before I start, I just want to say congratulations to you too. I've been following your journey with the work that you're doing in the IT and the coding space for women. So I think you should be proud of the strides that you've made too.
Thank you so much, Elaine.
Okay, so I'm Shalane, like Mbali said, and the Trevor Noah Foundation, we publicly launched in April of 2018. Obviously well, we still are and will always be led by Trevor Noah's vision for South Africa. And we focus on education because if you know through Trevor's story, or if you've read Border Crime, you know that he really attributes education as one of the key experiences that led to his success today. And not only education, but a good education at that. And he'll always say that. And so what the Trevor Noah Foundation strives to do is ensure that youth have the educational foundation and opportunity required to be leaders of South Africa. And we kind of do this in two ways. So in 2018, when we started, we launched with what we now call our Kulani Schools program. So we partner with government schools and we implement projects that are best positioned to address their priority needs in order to see the matric students transition into higher learning institutions or other opportunities after matric. So we look at transitioning into universities, TVETs, and also skills-based programs with the idea that the longer that they're in a continued learning environment, the better they'll be to succeed in the future. And so we started with that program in 2018. And this year, we launched our second initiative, which is called Education Changemakers. And that is a leadership training initiative for young education leaders, including principals, teachers, and even education leaders in the nonprofit space. That program was launched in partnership with YALI, or the Young African Leaders Initiative. And we just finished the leadership training portion of our first cohort. And so we'll see 2 more cohorts after that. So we signed up for 3 years. And that program is exciting because while our Kulani Schools initiative impacts learners by partnering with schools directly, by training teachers, it's another way to impact education. But we're saying if we can train one teacher, then we impact many learners at the same time. And the Education Changemakers initiative includes training, a leadership training portion, plus some resourcing for those leaders to then implement innovative projects back in their schools and communities. And in the implementation phase, we partner them with a coach who can really track their deliverables and their progress over 6 months following the leadership training program. So it really is about a year's intervention. And as of now, we only finished the leadership training portion. So we still, I'm very excited about following those leaders as they implement their projects back home. So it's another approach to addressing education, but I'm excited that we've kind of tackled both aspects.
That's really amazing. I think just huge congratulations just for the amazing work in a short space of time that you guys have been able to deliver. And obviously, I know that just from the past projects that you're mentioning, it was launched for leaders, not just for South African leaders, but for leaders from across Africa. And I think one of my questions would be, I know that you're somebody who's traveled the world and lived in different spaces, different countries even, and so does Trevor. And so my question then is, with everything that has been identified, of course, in Africa. Why was education so important to be the focal point for the Trevoh Noah Foundation?
Yeah, I mean, if you spoke to Trevor, you know, he would say that education is the seed from which everything grows. And I tend to agree with him on that. I think education is the most foundational investment that you can make in a person. Even if I reflect on my own journey and, you know, being fortunate enough to live and work and contribute and learn from different societies around the world. I always look to the education that I received in the States as well. And so, as we know in South Africa, we know South Africa is a very unequal society. And I know we'll talk about this, but COVID-19 is further exposing the inequalities that we have in this country. And so and I know Trevor would feel the same, but we just want to make sure that all kids are receiving the level and quality of education that they deserve. And even in the education space, yes, we know that education is a very broad term. So what we're trying to achieve is quality education for those kids.
Thank you so much. And so just obviously as pin coders, I think whenever we have these conversations, our angle is always look at women within the space. I mean, how many women are being impacted through different projects? And I think just from the work that you guys have been doing, is there a particular focus on women or like gender in particular? And is there like a focus on just driving and impacting more women though within the work that you're doing?
Right. So I don't have the exact numbers for you on the women that we've impacted. But at least in the first school, so the first school we partnered with is New Nation School, and they're based in Frederiksdorp. So they're just south of the UJ Bunting Road campus. And we are working with all of the students from grades 9 through 12. But what I will say is, most of the top achievers that we have are women. And you know, I think in the past 2 years, the students who receive scholarships to continue on to higher learning institutions with all of their fees paid, both of those students were women. So we don't have a focus on lens. We don't have a focus or lens particularly on women. I understand the particular challenges that women face, but I think because all of the students that we work with come from vulnerable backgrounds and vulnerable communities, we kind of support all of the students for grades 9 through 12. I guess I should mention that the school that we initially partnered with it's considered an LSEN school, or a school for learners with special education needs. And it's because many of the students come from orphanages, or they're called child youth care centers around Johannesburg. So New Nation School is a feeder school for students living in those types of home situations. And yeah, so many of the kids don't have parents. Many of the kids struggle with issues of documentation. And it's not, I guess the school does have students who are considered asylees, refugees, but many are also South Africans who still have issues with documentation, which is a huge stereotype that if a child has documentation issues, they're not necessarily South African. Yeah. But there are so many loopholes around one parent passing away, for example, and the father is nowhere to be found. Therefore, that child has issues getting their birth certificate or whatever they need in order to access learning opportunities, job opportunities post-matric. So we do work with a quite vulnerable student. But in our Education Change Makers program, I did look at the numbers, and I think about 45% of them are women. So almost half, but I will say that in both of our initiatives, women represent almost half, if not half, of the population. So it is it's quite equal from a gender perspective.
That's amazing to hear. And
Mhm.
obviously, I think for us as pin coders, though our focus is within the tech space, we do understand that majority of the time, what we've witnessed, and obviously I could be wrong, but men are so easy to take up opportunities, and so
Mm,
women we are usually very busy, and I think this is why it's very important to have these conversations because, like you've mentioned in the beginning, you have a little child and then you've got work, and so you've got all these things to balance, and so majority of
mm,
opportunities you're looking at time and you're looking at, is it realistic for me? And so I think this is why my question is around, are women taking up these opportunities, or are we still held back by our lives back at home that we aren't able to take up such opportunities? And I'm really excited to hear that women within the education space are really standing up and taking up these opportunities, and obviously really excited to hear about the two young ladies who've received scholarship. We do believe that anything that involves a woman is definitely just going to be great. And I just wanted to find out, are there any success stories that you maybe would like to share that have touched your heart and has just made you feel like
yeah.
this is why this is so important to you, and this is why you could do this for the rest of your life?
Yeah, that's a powerful question. Yeah, but I think the two women that I spoke of initially about the scholarships, I do want to tell their stories a little bit more. So the first student who received a scholarship last year, her name was Tato. And when we launched, we included voices of the students in the launch event. So we had four students, we had two alumni and two current students speak. And Tato was one of those students. At the time, she was in grade. I guess she was in grade 12. She was in grade, so she was a matric student, and she talked about her aspirations of studying. I think she's studying biology, or she's studying something in the sciences field, and her speech brought people to tears because she just talked about how her biggest fear was disappointing her mom and living in the unknown, and the challenges that she anticipates facing in in university, because many of these students don't have access to technology or experience using a computer, and having that set them back a bit when they reach university. And her speech absolutely brought everyone to tears. But she was the top performing student at New Nation School and had been since, I don't know, grade 3 or 4. So in following her journey and in giving her access to some of the interventions that we were implementing at New Nation School, one of them included obviously our digital skills program, so giving her access to the new computer lab, but also working very closely with our career guidance partners. So we work with Grades Match, and they also use technology to match students to careers and higher learning institutions based on their academic marks and their career interests. And considering she was the top performing student at New Nation School, we were so happy that in the end, so one of the things that Grades Match does is help every single student apply for NASPIS,
Okay.
because all of the students qualify at New Nation School, but the NASPIS application process isn't the easiest. And so we're very fortunate that we had a partner and a resource to kind of help every single student submit an application to NASPIS who qualified. So she was able to get NASPIS, but then also through our network, she was able to secure a housing bursary on top of that. So her housing was sorted. And so, yeah, so now she's studying at UJ. I can't remember what she's studying exactly, but I know it's either biology or chemistry. And yeah, it was so fun to navigate her through that process. And then now even at UJ, we're trying to secure a mentor for her within the university.
Oh,
So yeah, so she was our first success story in the first year that we started, and we're so happy that she is able to help her transition and study the field that she wants to. And that's in STEM, and we know that STEM isn't the easiest field to study post-matric. So that's Tato. And then the second student last year that we got a scholarship for, her name is Belina. And I remember her because she also is interested in STEM. And last year, we were sponsored by Microsoft to attend this event called Curiosity, which exposes grade 11 students to STEM careers and STEM innovations. And at the time, New Nation School doesn't even have CAT as a subject, but they selected their top 5 performing girls in math to attend this event. And she was one of them. So at the event, they got to play with technology such as green screen, coding. I'm sure you know, but there's this ball where you can code, and then the ball will move left, right, center, go fast, etc., based on the code that you enter.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know what it's called, but it's,
I know there's
it's
a
like
lot
a
of
toy.
games. I know there's a lot of games that have just made
Okay.
coding very exciting.
Yes, yeah. So they got to play with all of those things. And then we started, setting goals around academics and bringing in different institutions into New Nation School so that they could see what's required to get into a UP, for example, or a TVET. And she was one of the students that ran up to me and was saying that she was so excited because she now knew the math scores that she had to achieve in order to get into a school like UP. And so when that happened, I was so excited because it was telling me that the mindset at New Nation School was changing, that people actually knew the goals that they had to achieve to get to the next level. And that was so exciting for me. And so the opportunity that we were able to expose her to is, again, through our network, we're good friends with the Charlize Theron Outreach Project, Africa Outreach Project. So it's called CTAOP for short. And they have scholarships available. So we helped her apply on her behalf. And she was shortlisted, went in for the interview, and she was selected. And so now she's studying at UKZN, also in the STEM field. I think she's studying applied biology. But that scholarship sorted her with a laptop and a mentor and housing, and it was all inclusive.
Oh, wow.
And the first time she ever got onto a plane was to attend the orientation at UKZN with her dad. And so, so that's also really powerful. Really excited for her. And I do feel like we, helped shift the trajectory of her life by linking her up to these opportunities that she deserved.
Oh wow, that's really amazing. Oh wow. And these are obviously stories that we don't get to hear often, and I think that's why it was so important for me to just, to find out what are some of the success stories. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that made me a bit emotional also. So I think one of my, very important questions is, how has the Trevoh Noah Foundation been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic that's currently given all of us a very challenging and new reality?
Yeah. So obviously, with schools being closed, we know that our Kulani Schools program isn't able to run as it was before. So there are no in-school programs. And it's just given us a lot of anxiety as well. I think, like you were speaking about earlier, it's so difficult to plan when you don't know what you're planning for. And so we've had to do a lot of debating on our side to say, what are our short-term goals to respond to urgency? And then how does that impact our long-term goals? Is our mandate still relative? How can we, considering our name, and I think a lot of what causes me anxiety is like what people expect of us given our name. How can we contribute meaningfully in a way that doesn't just create noise? We don't want to just say things for the sake of saying things because people expect us to, but how can we actually how can we actually contribute to the voice in a way that's helpful and impactful? So we have diverted a lot of our program funds to Food Forward SA, who's an amazing South African, almost, I guess they're considered a food charity, but they have a really great business model where they address food insecurity, but they also rescue food that would otherwise be thrown away and then redistribute that to nonprofits across the country. So through that business model, they're able to deliver meals that they've costed down to 85 cents per meal because their distribution is efficient. And so we diverted a lot of our funding to them. Through our Kulani Schools program, we're in close communication with our school principals and the leaders at those schools to help them plan and brainstorm around how to pivot and how to prepare students for learning when they return. And then on our education changemaker side, like I mentioned, we had just finished our training when COVID-19 started, and the top 10 finalists who qualify for a grant, we are now, I think this next week, we're speaking with them about their projects and helping them think through how their solutions change in response to COVID-19 as well. So, you know, it's difficult. It's not easy. And if I look at the environments or the ecosystem in education and the nonprofit space as well, I think everyone is equally confused, and everyone wants to do something, but it's so hard to just act because you don't want to waste money, you don't want to waste resources, you want to be smart and intent and have the right intent on how you proceed forward. So yeah, I don't know. We don't have the answers, but it's hard.
Definitely, I can only imagine. And so I think one of the things that I wanted to find out, being so, I think, working within the education space, what are some of the challenges, or rather, how do you think COVID-19 has affected the South African education system in particular?
Yeah. Yeah, I really feel for the DBE during this time. I don't know if you watched the announcement that they made on Thursday, where they were talking through some of their plans of reopening schools. And I feel for them. There's a lot of tension between not wanting to waste the rest of the school year, but also ensuring that teachers and students are safe. And they're really stuck in a tough place in between that. But I think what COVID-19 has showed us is just how unequal the South African education system really is. In other countries, the easy answer would be to just pivot online and to offer online learning and online classrooms. And in South Africa, you can't really use that same lens here. I was reading some stats the other day that was saying only 10% of students have access to internet connectivity in their homes. And so when we use a broad solution and a broad stroke and say, okay, everyone just pivot online, we actually exclude a lot of the South African youth population. And so it's not easy. And inclusivity is difficult. Many of the students that we're working with don't have access to data, don't have access to technology like devices, tablets, or smartphones. And then some don't even have access to electricity in extreme situations. So for those students, we almost leave them behind by saying, let's just move online. Let's just implement online learning. And I think we see a lot of private schools carrying on with business as normal, with devices at home and learning at home, and then many students, for them, learning has just stopped. So we can't use a one-size-fits-all approach, unfortunately.
And that is, I think, a very sad reality. Like you've mentioned, you've got schools that are opening up, but you've got a number of other students that are very comfortable at home and studying from the comfort of their homes. And so I think it's a really huge gap. And I think this brings me to my next question. What are some of the exciting innovations, and I think that you've perhaps maybe identified within the education space, that you think might be helpful to help, I think, just preparing for the future, or might be able to help, I think, reach the marginalized communities?
Yeah. So, I mean, in a broad sense, I think it's really shown how much good leadership plays a role in all of this, right? The ability to think quickly, the ability to adapt, the ability to be a good communicator. If you're a principal, how do you communicate to your teachers? How do you communicate to your students? I was thinking around the topic of innovation. this morning, or when in preparing for this conversation. And because South Africa is a country of extremities. On one end, innovation looks like it's very fancy, right? So it's in the education tech space. There is AI, and there's all of these fancy gimmicks, or not gimmicks, sorry, but games that we were talking about earlier, and that's all fine and well. Like, we need to be exploring that. We need to be setting aside R&D for those innovations. But then on the other side, we can't forget about what does innovation look like in a way that repurposes assets that are available for students and schools. So many of the students and schools that we're working with are simply using WhatsApp as a way to communicate with their students, issue assignments, issue lectures, and tutor students. And, that's all fine and well. For many schools and students, that still remains an innovation. And maybe the innovation is around how we use existing platforms like that in a better way. Some of our schools have smart boards that have been issued by the government. Some of them do have Wi-Fi technology issued by the government. So when they get back to schools, is there smart ways that we could use those resources to, for example, have a physical teacher in one class, but then broadcast a lesson and a lecture to another? That way we can maintain social distancing, but use the technologies that we have available to us. So I think in some ways we have to go back to basics to respond to the urgency and the need. And yeah, I think innovation and creativity doesn't always have to incorporate some high-end technology. How can we innovate around low tech that we have already? But again, just using it in a smarter and more efficient way.
And I think what you've just raised is a very important point, given that already we have all these exciting apps and platforms, but what's really the percentage of South Africans from marginalized communities
I can use that
really actually exactly that can use that? And so I think moving at a fast pace can also just be very detrimental to our society, because then you've got people that were left behind staying very far behind. And I think that's very important. I think opinion that you just raised in terms of saying perhaps let's use what's existing. If people are all on WhatsApp, how do we better use WhatsApp to just get education out there versus creating all these online platforms that perhaps maybe someone cannot access? You've got your network providers already giving us WhatsApp packages, and so if I can only access WhatsApp for free per month, I can't access apps because I don't have data for that. And I think that's a very just I think interesting points that you've just raised. It is a very exciting time in terms of, I think, individuals then start looking at the gaps and then start going, how do we then use what we have? And I think innovation has been driven by currently what's happening. And so I think the solutions that will come out from this is what I'm really excited to see, and just how included the youth then becomes with all the solutions that we are developing. And I think this brings me to my next question of leadership in terms of how do you think then COVID-19, I mean, this is the first time in South Africa we've ever had a national lockdown. And so I think the things that young leaders growing up in today have experienced is obviously things that they will never forget. And so I think my question is, how do you think this has shaped young leaders, or rather future leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that through this we see that nothing is permanent, right? And so again, when I was speaking about the leadership qualities are revealing itself as probably the best asset that you could have. So the ability to think quickly. So if nothing is permanent, I mean, we're seeing businesses fall. We're seeing that a lot of businesses and systems and institutions are so reliant on instant cash flow that something like a few-week lockdown has been able to, just tarnish those businesses, unfortunately. And so as young leaders, how can we think long-term? How can we better prepare for the unknown? So, when we grow up, we're told to always have like a rainy day savings account. Like, we realize that those things are so important. How can we build up assets on the side so that if something like this were to happen, we can tap into those assets? And and yeah, I mean, I feel for young people. It's when I, even as adults, you know, we're having Zoom calls with other businesses, and you see people our age. It's the first time that they're actually like logging into these things, and so you know, the struggle is felt. I think we equally, and it's one of the one of the interesting things about COVID-19 is that it is an equalizer. Everyone may not feel it the same, but everyone feels it in some capacity. Everyone is constrained by the lockdown. And so if there are young leaders out there, I mean, this is now the time for them to step up. But again, it's hard because I don't want to put pressure on people. I think, you know, earlier we were talking about mental health and mental wellness. You know, you gotta take care of yourself first. And there are a lot of principals and teachers that we've spoken to who are concerned about the anxiety levels of their matrics when they come back to school. You know, they've asked for the first week that students come back to school, can we just focus on acclimating them back into a new normal? Can we just educate them on new hygiene practices? Can we just get them settled before we start, you know, pushing new material and content into them? So I think not just young leaders, but everyone during this time must realize the leadership capabilities that are necessary.
Yeah.
And I do think everyone has the opportunity to be a leader. I do think everyone has the capability and potential to be a leader. And so if anything, I think people must realize the importance of leadership qualities during this time.
Yeah, it's
Sorry, that was a very complicated answer to your question. But yeah.
No. I definitely get it, and I think you've raised a very important point of just saying no pressure. And I think a lot of people are going into depression, not because unbalance. I think it's because of the pressure. We've got so much pressure in terms of just getting it right. And I think mental health is such a very important factor, that let's be okay first and then try to handle everything when we are much more stable, right? And like you said, even our leaders are trying to adapt as quickly as possible. And so we are literally waiting for a leader to try and either ease the stress that you're going through. Whereas I think just taking care of ourselves is the most important thing. And I think it's really exciting to see how individuals just from across the world have started, you know, having all these different activities to try and I think just make the time pass. But in reality, I think just also stopping and realizing that I'm going through this and what do I need to ensure that I'm also very important. I've been reading a lot about what's currently happening. We've got households where the parents are abusive, and so you've got this young child that is now been forced to go back home because of the national lockdown, and she's stuck with this abuse all around her. And I think this is the moment where we need to really start looking at how fortunate one is, but also just start thinking about other issues that other individuals are also dealing with. And just I feel like we are going through this as a nation versus just going through this as individuals. It is a very, very, very hectic time, and I really do appreciate you making the time to chat with me today for our first session. I think for me, it's really around how do we drive conversations that matter. During this period, we're hearing a lot of fake news. People are confused, people are trying to find answers. And I think just having just honest, open conversations with industry experts and industry leaders just to try and find direction, and to also just, I think, hear from individuals in South Africa that we can also relate to, I think is very important, not only just for small businesses, but I think just for individuals in South Africa in this moment. And so thank you so much for your time. I've learned so much, I think, just from this conversation. And I know when we push it up to our communities and different platforms, they would really learn a lot from this conversation. I have two questions that we were able to gather. So what we tried to do was use our WhatsApps and all these different streams just to try and get additional questions from you, and I've wrapped up these two questions from two different individuals from social media. And one of them was at Kimberly Kiva, who wanted to find out if women from other countries can benefit from the programs that the foundation runs, or is specifically just for SA citizens.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. Our Kulani Schools program, as I mentioned, does partner with South African government schools. In one way to interpret your question is um, for those schools, our interventions are not only available to South African citizens. In fact, at New Nation School, there are students who are considered refugees or asylees um, who attend those schools as well. So everyone who goes to those schools are able to access our interventions. If you're talking about you personally, our Education Change Makers program is also not exclusive to South Africans only. So we partnered with Yali's, a regional center in South Africa, for this initiative. So it's Yali Regional Center for Leadership, the South African Hub. So I didn't mention this earlier, but one of the exciting things about the Education Changemakers program was that 13 different Southern African countries were represented. Yeah, it was very exciting. And I think at the end, when we had the graduation ceremony, it was so emotional. I actually I never cry on stage, and I gave a speech, or I was talking about the experience, and I was actually brought to tears myself. And then I think I triggered Waterworks, because after that there were a lot of people that were crying. But I think the point is that, you know, 50 different individuals came together from 13 different Southern African countries and were able to share experiences that from their home countries around challenges in education, different solutions and ideas on how to make the education system better, and they kind of really bonded across borders. So I think your question is important because when we think of solutions or programs, it doesn't really make sense to be exclusive to one geographic area. And I understand, you know, if we had all the resources in the world, we would love to, you know, grow geographically as quickly as possible. But it is hard to find a balance between making sure that you have expertise in one area before then branching out. So our initiative with Yali's Southern African Hub was our first kind of dip into expanding our interventions to other countries, and it turned out really well. So I'm excited for the next 2 years.
Thank you so much. And I think what you've just mentioned also answered a question that was shared by at underscore Tammy Twins, young girls who just wanted to find out how can they also, I think, benefit from the programs. And I think this obviously answers their question that if they obviously go to the relevant schools that the organization works with, they can definitely benefit from all the programs and projects that you guys are rolling out for these young individuals.
Right. And if you are considered, or if you are in the education space, and if you are interested in the Education Changemakers program, just be on the lookout. I assume we'll open for applications early next year. So early next year sounds like far away, but it probably will come very quickly.
6 months.
Yeah, it'll come very quickly. So yeah, as I mentioned, we have 2 more cohorts coming up that we're funding. And so if you are an education change maker, we would love to have you as a part of our next cohort.
Thank you so much, Shalane. I'm definitely
Thank
going to be
you.
looking out for just the amazing work that you guys have been doing and will continue to be doing. It is a scary but exciting time. And I think post this, it will be, I think, amazing to see just how organizations have obviously transformed their services and how they are offered to individuals, and how we obviously come out of this as a nation. I'm very excited just for the amazing work that you're doing.
Thank you.
You've always just been an amazing woman, and I think it's exciting to see you continue to drive impact in everything that you do. And that obviously is one of the things that I think we spoke about in our first ever engagements when I had landed in Johannesburg, fresh from Durban, and I think it was really just about how do you make impact, and just ensuring that you grow within the space that you are in. I'm really excited to watch the journey. I will definitely be following the Trevoh Noah Foundation page just to see the amazing work that you guys continue doing. I know that you guys will obviously do amazing works and have hundreds and hundreds of young people empowered and exposed.
Thanks, Molly, and congratulations to you again as well. And let's think about ways in which we can work together. And you recently told me that you took the very difficult leap of focusing on pink coders on a full-time basis. So congratulations to you. That's not easy, but I think that's where the magic really begins, is when you're able to dedicate your full self to your organization or cause. So congrats to you. I'm very proud of you and excited to continue watching you as well.
Thank you so much, Shalane. Have an amazing day. Keep safe, and
You too.
keep spreading the positivity. We'll be in touch.
Thanks. You too. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Okay.